Thank you for joining us, Iman,
Thanks
on
for
Being
having
Black
me.
in Britain. Iman, do you know what? Okay, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first.
Okay.
Because I've got lots to say.
Okay.
But it's really nice to have you. Do you know how long it's been trying to get Iman on the show?
Do you know what? The life of a teacher,
I
as you
know,
know, Chedza, is busy.
I know.
But I'm so glad to finally be here.
That's not your situation no more, though, is it?
It's not, and we'll get onto that shortly.
That's it. But before we spoil it, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Okay.
Iman, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it?
Okay, great. So I'm Iman. I was a classroom teacher, sixth form, teaching criminology and law. I've now transitioned out of the classroom for a short term. And I am going into research. So I'll be doing research in sociology and social policy. I'll touch on that a bit later as well.
Yeah.
And I also work within RARA, doing within the learning and development. So yeah, I do a bit of everything.
A few hats on. A few hats. So we're going to deal with one hat at a time. Can we start with teaching, Iman, then? So yes, you've been a classroom teacher. Yeah. Before we even talk about your leaving, why did you actually choose to step into the teaching profession? What was your reasoning? What was your why?
So I think deep down, I was always meant to be a teacher. Okay. And I think others who know me well might agree, in the sense that maybe certain aspects of my personality might have pointed towards that. But really and truly, I do think it is something that was deep rooted in. I started off when in secondary school. I did my my work experience in my old primary school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
like when we were in year 11 or whatever.
Year 9 or something like that. Yeah, so I went back to my old primary school, and yeah, I think like along my journey, I've been doing bits and bobs. Do you know what I mean?
That kind of pointed you in that direction.
Exactly. But I think really and truly what it was is the fact that I feel that working with young people, working with anyone in general, and just being able to educate people is something that I find really fulfilling. And I feel that through education, through teaching, you can inspire people, you can support people, you can guide people. And especially my recent time working with young people, the ages 16 to 19, I think that age group in particular is just they're really special, I think, and they've got a lot to offer, they've got a lot to give. And it's really, I'm really quite honoured to have been part of a lot of their journeys.
Yeah.
So yeah, teaching for me, the reason why I went into teaching is because I do want to be part of making a change. And I think that, working with children, working with young people is the start of that.
Yeah, yeah. I find it interesting because speaking to different teachers and teaching at different levels, everyone has their own preferences as to which age group they would have preferred to teach. Now, I remember my teaching experience. I remember going into a primary school for 1 week. I was like, nah, I do not have the capacity to be speaking in that particular voice and tone all day, every day.
Yeah.
Whereas I loved that sort of year 7 to 11, even the sixth formers, where a child has the vocabulary enough to engage in an intellectual conversation.
Yeah.
But my question is, how was that teaching specifically 16s to 18s in terms of like your relationship with them as teacher, because they're bordering on adults, they're adults at this point. This is like a pivotal point where it's the last like step before they get into the world.
Yeah.
Compulsory education after that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
So what was that like, teaching that really interesting group?
So I'll start off with just kind of giving a bit of context. So I actually trained to teach adults.
Right.
And I did my teacher training, my placements, teaching adults as well.
Okay.
But, it was around COVID time and I went into sixth form. So I thought I'd start off there. And actually I found that I didn't really want to leave it, to be honest. Yeah. I think the fact that, I guess, I'm quite a young teacher, and in that sense, I think the students really do relate to me. And I think that relationship that we're able to build through that is something that's really positive. And I think that I can support them in a way that maybe others can't.
Right.
I can see things more from their perspective. I like to think that, you know, I'm not that much older than them as well. So, you know, I think it's really positive that I can share my experiences with them. And, you know, I've been through the same things or similar things that they've been through. So I think working with that group in particular, I think it's a really good stage, because I remember myself back at 16, 17, 18, when I was deciding what I was going to study at uni, where I was going to go to uni. And during that space of time, I went through so many changes, changing my mind, changing my hair, changing everything, you know what I mean? But I think the most important thing is that guidance and just giving them that support that they need. So I really do appreciate this opportunity of actually teaching that age group, because it's really fulfilling. I do find it really fulfilling, more so than, you know, let's say, for example, if it was a case where I was teaching adults, they've kind of experienced life to an extent, you know, but these young people, I see younger Iman at the time, do you know what I mean?
And seeing yourself in them, isn't it?
And so for that reason, I especially just want to pour everything into them as much as I can, just to make sure that they do have a better life than I have had, and you know, than I'm having, you know, and they have more opportunities than I've had, because that's the only way that we're gonna evolve more, and that's the only way that we're gonna progress, if you know, they are actually being able to just experience different things and go after different things as well.
Indeed. Now, yes, it's fulfilling, but you still left the teaching profession, Iman. So I want to explore maybe some of the challenges, like beyond the fulfillment, because I'm absolutely here with you with the fulfillment. It's just, sorry, but that relationship with the kids, it keeps you alive. It's so heartwarming. I remember leaving and just being like, I wish I could just stay just to see how you lot turn out at the other end. You know, when you want to stick with that cohort, because they've been your babies since they came into the school. But beyond just that really lovely relationship that we have with the students, what would have been some of the challenges on your way out?
So I think there's been quite a few challenges along my journey. And I think as a teacher, and I'm sure you can probably agree, there's just the general challenges that come with being a teacher, that maybe might take away from what you want to pour into the students. So time restraints, for example, you know, assessments, preparing them for assessments, whether it's formal, whether it's informal, it's very time consuming. It requires a lot from me, and even just trying to find the balance is something that I found really difficult to begin with. And I always felt, especially throughout my teacher training, that I had to do more. So I always felt as if what I was doing wasn't enough. Even though, you know, students would be singing my praises and I was getting good reports and things like that, it was always a case that it felt as though I wasn't doing enough. And because of that, I was constantly just doing too much. So fast forward to my first official teaching role, my work-life balance was
in the bin,
non-existent, in the bin. Yeah, definitely. And this was during COVID as well. So I was teaching from home, and I'd find myself at my desk from, you know, 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. sometimes. And I just found that it was really unhealthy. So that is something that I identified within myself, and I knew that I had to change it.
Right.
So it is something that I have worked on. And I do think that up until now, I have found a better balance. However, it is still something that is very time consuming. And I think also what I would say is that I've always been the kind of person who wants to change the world.
The whole wide world.
And I do feel as though it can be quite overwhelming at times as well, because there's times when you physically there's only one of you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you cannot physically do everything and be everything to everyone. And so because of that, there has been some times where I have felt a bit demotivated. I have felt a bit disheartened because maybe certain things or certain injustices that I might have witnessed, and I felt that there was not much that I could do about it.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads on to the reasons for me,
Right.
or one of the reasons anyway for me leaving the teaching profession for now.
Yeah.
So it is a sense where I feel that there's other ways that I can promote change rather than from within an academic institution.
Right. There's so much to unpack, Iman. Like, my head's spinning there, just thinking quite a few things. So I want to unpack the first one, which is this feeling of having to do more or always having to do more. My question is, why did you feel like you had to do more, or why did you ever feel like what you were doing wasn't enough? Why? Or who told you that, or who made you feel that way?
So to be honest, right, I was told that, right?
By who?
I was told that. So,
Spill the beans.
So despite the fact, like I said, throughout my whole teacher training, throughout my whole early teaching career, I was always, I've always been the kind of person who has wanted to excel academically, in my work, in whatever I'm doing. So because of that, I have always put 110% in things that I do. So in this instance, I guess it was a situation where with teaching, it's a lot to get your head around at the beginning, isn't it? When
it's
it comes
information overload.
Exactly. So you're managing your own information, and also you're managing the information you're trying to share with the students as well as all the other expectations that are being placed. And I felt it was a case where during my early teaching career, in certain spaces, there was a bit of an imbalance in, let's say, the racial awareness, I think,
right.
In the sense that I was the only person of colour in that department.
Yep.
And I think in the whole faculty, actually.
Right.
So it was a case where it felt as though I just wasn't understood. It felt as though I couldn't really be myself, right? And most people who meet me would think that I'm a really friendly person, I'm always chatting, things like that, right? But in some spaces where you don't necessarily feel safe, and I've got to say, I didn't feel fully safe in that space. So I felt that I couldn't be myself. I just kept it professional, 100%. And I was struggling to keep that balance with... oversharing as they like to do in the staff room. But also, keeping it professional as well. Yeah. So I wasn't judged further. I think there was just a lot of question around maybe why I wasn't as open as other people might be. And I think that's one of the main issues.
Right.
Not that I was incapable of doing my work, because that wasn't the case at all.
It wasn't a competence issue
Exactly.
at all.
It was more so the fact that I just didn't seem to fit in.
Ooh.
So yeah.
I
think that's what it is, yeah.
Belonging,
definitely. Yeah, I definitely feel as though I didn't belong there.
Yeah. I find that, because with my research, I've spoken to so many Black women in teaching across the UK. I feel like the reason why I fully resonate with you is just for the fact that we taught in the north of England.
Yeah.
Because when you speak to other teachers across the UK, you find that down south, there's representation there,
There's a lot of representation.
Like, you see yourself, there's an increased visibility of Black teachers or Black women teachers as a whole.
Yeah.
That there is definitely a north-south divide in terms of lived experience. The classrooms look different. The workforce looks different. There's a discrepancy there. And I fully hear it being like the only teacher of colour or being the only black teacher in the whole entire workforce. It's interesting, I'd say. But we're not going to unpack that too much for today because it gets a bit intense.
Yeah, that's another discussion for another day.
But yeah, just being a black face in a white space is a very interesting phenomenon. I feel like there needs to be more research in that space, to be honest, just to articulate all those things that you're saying where maybe that sense of not fitting in or people feeling like you're not being honest or open and transparent. It's like they're not asking the question of why, they're just observing what they see, but not understanding maybe the dynamics, those relational dynamics culturally, like what I do on a weekend doesn't look like what you lot do on a weekend.
Exactly.
So I feel like my story is not the same as your story.
Yeah, which is why I refrain from having many of them on social media.
Yeah, because there's such a difference. That's a really interesting piece there. But I guess moving on to just the more generic demands, because yes, you've got like the generic burdens that teachers as a whole carry, plus the race issue, plus the race gender issue. We can start talking intersectionality, but we're not even going to go into that right now. But how did you manage those demands that were just generally placed on teachers? Because yes, some people took to the picket lines and said, you know what, enough is enough. Yeah. Rishi, Boris,
enough is enough.
Everyone else. How did you respond to that? Were you the enough is enough, I'm just not going to do any more than I'm getting paid to do? Were you the I'm going to do it for the kids, I know it's costing me something, but this is for the kids? How did you navigate that? Because I do believe that the demands on teachers border on ridiculous. Yeah. Especially teaching during COVID, where you were teaching children in the school building. You were also teaching children at home. So you were then trying to create hybrid lessons to accommodate those that were present and those that were not. Yeah. And then for those that had issues that did not allow them to access the internet or be in the classroom, you then had to create non-accessible resources. So you were trying to create one lesson for 3 different types of students with the same hours, the same pay. Yeah. And the maths just wasn't making sense. But how did you navigate all those challenges?
I think, there's a load of challenges there to unpack that you've just mentioned. And I think a prime example, making resources for multiple students. So you're not just doing one lesson plan. Yeah. You're doing multiple lessons planned for 3 that for lesson. Exactly. And do you have that extra time? No. There's not enough time in the day. And that's when you start losing sleep. You start, or it'll be keeping you up as well, you know, and it'll start eating into your personal time. It'll start eating into your family time or your social time with your friends. And I think with those challenges, the only thing that you really can do is just be organised. I think because at the end of the day, these are all expectations on you as a classroom teacher, and you have to do it. It's part of the job. It's part of the role. When it comes to differentiating between different students and ensuring that all of the students are receiving an equal education. So if one student needs more to get to that stage, then you're going to have to do it as their teacher, and it's your responsibility. So I do find that one of the things that did really help with that was just preparing things in advance and just making sure that that I was on top of things, so it wasn't stressing me out. But it's a learning curve, and it takes time, and it's a process. And as soon as when you start your teaching role as an early career teacher, you're not going to know it all. You're not going to know how to manage it all. And that's one of the most overwhelming things. So yeah, I would definitely say that was one of the biggest challenges, especially during COVID, just ensuring that a child's home environment was appropriate as well, and ensuring that, you know, they didn't have to look after the siblings or they didn't have to do whatever they might have had to have done, and were actually able to engage in the classroom. And it was really hard to keep track of the progress and how the students were doing. And for me, it was just really difficult because, you know, we were all going through a lockdown.
We were all going through it.
We were all going through a lockdown. It wasn't just the students. I was locked down in my house as well. So as well as everything that I was dealing with personally and within my own life, I had to also make sure that I was watching out for those students who, you know, maybe might not have the best home environment, and you know, the fact that they're home 24/7 now is an issue. So yeah, there's a lot there when it comes to those challenges, with resources, with learning, with just the general teaching side of things.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. That for me was one of the hardest things, knowing that there were some children going home to some really disruptive home environments, some really discouraging family setups, home lives, that I didn't know where the boundary was between trying to be a good teacher, almost trying to be a parent teacher, trying to be a big sis to this kid, and ensuring that I'm going above and beyond, making all the reasonable adjustments to make sure that they're accessing my lessons, but remembering or trying to accept that there was some variables I just couldn't control. You know, when you just want to take the child home and make sure they're safe.
Literally.
And you just want them to pass the A-levels or GCSEs. I think that was really breaking for me, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, definitely.
And just looking at how many students came back with anxiety disorders, just social maladaptiveness. They just couldn't like reintegrate into the classroom because whatever was going on at home, there were children that saw death. That saw death in their households, just severe sickness. Like you said, children that were basically carers in their own households. I remember there were students where can't access the lesson because my other sibling is using the laptop or the desktop because they've got exams, so their lesson is more important than mine. So this child is allowed to just play games all day because there's 4, 5, 6 siblings in the house. And it's like, but your education's important too. You're not going to get to your GCSEs if you haven't done your fundamentals at year 7.
Exactly.
There was just so much of it felt like a tug of war, I'm not going to lie, trying to teach during COVID. There were just so many variables that were beyond our control, yet we were supposed to teach and come out with the same results at the end of exam season. It was just...
And I think like one of the things as well was trying to maintain those professional boundaries as well.
Yeah, that's the
because
word.
This was this time was unprecedented, you know, no one could have prepared for it. And I think it's really difficult when you are dealing with young people, and especially vulnerable young people as well. Like you say, you just want to pick them up and cuddle them and just take them away to safety, and you feel as though there's certain things or there's certain lines that you can't cross. So yeah, that is something that I also found to be a bit of a knock-on effect from COVID. And I think that there's a lot of students, like you say, who have been impacted by it and they've got long-term difficulties now because of it. And I feel like in the classroom now, like that's one of the biggest challenges, trying to deal with all of the impacts of COVID, because it's completely changed the way that we have to do things now.
Oh, indeed. Do you think though that it's going to get to a point where we're not allowed to use COVID as an excuse? Or can we stand by the fact that known or unbeknown to us, there are long-term effects that will continue to affect education as we know it to be, or as we once knew it to be?
So I do think that there will be a point where it's no longer to be used as an excuse. I think slowly the kind of taking it out from I guess the school spaces, and I think one of the things that one of the issues with that for me is the fact that these long-term effects of COVID are not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think that's something that needs to be understood, because these children, these students, they've had their whole education interrupted, and it's, none of us can even begin to imagine what it might have been like for them. So during COVID, I was actually finishing off my teacher training. So I was still technically a student at the time.
Right.
So I did get a little feel for it, but I was an adult at the time. So it's very different to what they were experiencing, especially those who like the first cohort after COVID, who just started sixth form, and they really had it hard. They had a hard time because their whole GCSEs were interrupted. They didn't even get the opportunity to sit exams. So I remember when when we had our exams that first year, it was actually my first time since qualifying putting students through in the formal examinations, because previously during COVID we'd done the teacher assessed grades.
Yeah. I remember those.
Yeah, good times. So I think with that, they didn't know how to sit an exam.
Yeah.
So how are you going to pass an exam that you just don't know how to do it?
Yeah.
They don't know how to sit in exam conditions.
Yeah.
They don't understand how to even revise. They don't know how to do these things. These are all things that we had drilled into us during our year 9 GCSE exams. But a lot of them didn't have the opportunity. So they've been put in sixth form and now they're expected to do as normal. And, you know, the good thing I would say is that in the first year, there were some provisions put in place. So, for example, things like pre-seen tasks for the assessments and whatnot. So I think because of that, it did help with preparing the students a bit more. But then those same students who started last year, going into the next academic year, it was really difficult for them because they were now expected to do everything without those extra provisions in place, even though they were still suffering.
Yeah, like just take away all that scaffolding now, just swim, don't drown.
Yeah, literally that. So it was a journey.
Yeah.
It was a journey. And getting those students through and being there, you know, on the 17th of August on results day was a blessing. It was an absolute blessing. Just seeing their happy faces, getting all the messages and everything. And I think that for me just really emphasised the reason why I do what I do.
Indeed.
Regardless of all of those challenges, all the late nights and all of the weekends where I'm marking and everything else. That's the thing that really, it really made it worth it for me.
I love that. And before we come to a close, I guess my next question is, how does that lead into your research then, in terms of your doctoral research? What is your area of focus? I know you said it's something to do with students.
Yeah.
And I can see that you've got a heart for your students, Iman. But what could you explore that for us?
I can, definitely. So my research, I'll be looking at so I've not started yet. I'll be starting later on this term.
Yeah.
But I will be looking at the barriers that Black students in particular face in education, in HE. Specifically.
And what is HE for those that don't know?
Sorry, so HE is higher education, so university, so it could be anything from undergrad to postgrad, doctoral, postdoctoral, etc. So it'll be really interesting to look at that, and especially the fact that I'm looking at the North as well. And, you know, we mentioned earlier about how there's a huge difference, there's a huge contrast between the North and South in terms of representation of the teaching staff, the non-teaching staff, and just generally the student body as well. So I think there would be a huge difference there, but I'll be focusing on the North, and I'll be looking at just some of the barriers that they might have faced to, you know, whether it's attainment of their grades or whether it's actually comparing it to the dropout rates as well of uni, or whether it's looking at some of the key issues like COVID that we've just been discussing and how that might have impacted them. Because a lot of those students who were in, let's say, their first or second year of their undergraduate degrees were those COVID kids, you know. So it's a case of just following them through and just hearing about the student experience and just seeing, specifically for Black students, what is it that acts as a barrier, aside from what barriers every other student faces, because every student can face barriers. It's not to say that it's only Black students, but it's a case of what in particular, whether it's culture, whether it's religion, whether it's their family situations, or whatever it might be. Also looking at international students as well and seeing how things might be slightly different for them being international, but also studying in the North. Exactly. So I'm really excited to unpack it and just really just explore what what the different perspectives are
Right.
and just the different journeys that people have been through.
Yeah. I'm really excited about that, Iman, to be honest. And I wish you all the best.
Thank
I'm going to be
you.
cheering you on all the way.
Thank you. I know you will.
But no, thank you so much for sharing that, Iman. You're going to have to come back at another point in time so we can follow up on some of those points of discussion. I feel like there's just so much to explore around student experiences, staff experiences, just Black women in the workplace experiences. There's just really interesting things to further explore. But thank you so much, Iman, and we'll see you again.
Thanks for having me.